This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, the leader in offshore investing, connecting South Africa to opportunities worldwide. Invest better with Brenthurst. I was a little bemused when you said you would like that as your anthem, and then I realized your wife's name's Caro.
Yes, that's right. And her mother was Caroline, and my eldest daughter is Caroline.
Okay.
So there's but that's not the only reason.
Oh.
It's a happy song. And we live in a happy country. And we should all be happy.
Don't we just?
So.
Christo, it feels like just the other day you were at the Hermanus conference, but it's 18 months ago.
That's right.
It's extraordinary. But we are privileged to have you back.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming all the way to the Drakensberg.
My pleasure.
Beating the weather as well. We were, there was a few prayers that were going around here, I can tell you, yesterday when we spoke, and it was touch and go, but then God listened, and here you are. Isn't that a beauty?
It happens.
I want to start with Steinhoff.
Yes.
Sorry, guys, I'm not doing the normal introduction here. If you don't know Christo Wiese, just go look up on the internet.
For 10 years, I've never had an interview where Steinhoff was not raised. So it's absolutely par for the course.
We had a conversation in 2018.
Yeah.
Which was, Steinhoff was very fresh because it was 2017 was where it all happened.
Right.
And you said in that interview, it's dangerous to trust.
Yeah.
But in business, it's riskier to distrust. How do you build a business employing hundreds of thousands of people unless you have that absolute trust? In other words, it just seemed to me that, hang on, it's like it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
Absolutely. No, but I mean that, to me it seems so obvious. How can you even dream of building something, as you say, where hundreds of thousands of people are employed if you don't have trust? Because you can't get to everything. In fact, you can get to very little. And so for me, it's a very simple truth, very basic truth. It's dangerous to trust, but it's more limiting if you don't trust. So to me, that's a greater danger.
It reminded me of Warren Buffett, who does business on a handshake. Do you do that?
I did my deal with Jooste on a handshake. The lawyers came afterwards, all the agreements and all the structuring, that happened afterwards. But the deal was done on a handshake.
I knew him quite well because of the racing industry.
I remember.
I would see Markus maybe once a month, have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And he had the hugest respect and regard for you. He would talk about you so much. And yet, what he did to you.
Yeah, but I mean, Alec, why should I be different? He did it to thousands of people. And he did it to people who were very close friends, people who were in very vulnerable positions as CEOs of banks and so on, that trusted him. And, he pretended that they were his closest friends. They were at every function, every party. And he did it to them. So why wouldn't he do it to me? But I made a statement in the press once. It came out afterwards that he had this girlfriend. Now, I confronted him at one stage when I heard the rumor, and he denied it. Now, I then said I made the press statement, which I thought was a bit harsh, but I said, if he could lie to his wife every day, why would he not lie to me? I mean, he'd been married to her for 20 years or whatever, and he lived a double life.
It was an extraordinary situation. We haven't spoken since his death, since his suicide. Any changed thoughts on the man?
No, I'll tell you what did change. I tried to, follow the advice in the Bible that you must forgive. But I decided not to forgive him ever. And which I had difficulty with. And then I also, for a long time, thought that I had no sympathy for his family. But I've kind of changed my thinking about that.
How?
Well, I'm not going to persecute them. You know, I've sued Jooste for the return of Landsrak, which is where my Steinhoff disaster originated. I wanted to sell Landsrak, and he said, but I'll buy it from you. I'll put together a consortium, I'll buy it from you. And of course, when the fraud emerged, I can now claim restitution on the basis of, in our law, fraud unravels everything. So I'm hoping to get it back.
Did you follow the case of the man who supposedly bought Landsrak?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't follow it. Out of the blue, I got this report that, first of all, I heard he died, this fellow Malcolm King, who was Jooste's bag man. And I phoned a few people. I said, has he really died? Because I knew that he was somewhere in the background involved in the court case which I'd launched. And nobody could confirm it until, funny enough, another South African I met in London, and I said, do you know whether this fellow died? He says, I happen to know because I tried to get an appointment with the dentist on the island of Jersey, and I couldn't. And then the dentist phoned and said, the guy who had the appointment died, so you can have the appointment. And the guy was Malcolm King. So at least I knew he died. But of course, at the time, we didn't know what he died of. And it was only 2 years later that the police arrested a prostitute and her pimp because it appears that their MO was to poison the clients and to rob them. And they robbed him evidently of his Rolex, but gave him a little bit too much poison and he died. These people are now being sentenced in the UK in the next couple of weeks.
But the extraordinary thing about that story was nobody knew that he had died of anything other than
they said natural causes.
Yeah.
And then they found there was another guy who died. And that led them to the prostitute and the pimp. And that led them to 2 other guys who had also taken the poison, but not enough. So, and then they exhumed his body, presumably, and found the poison.
Extraordinary
Story.
Who says God hasn't got a sense of humor?
Yeah, must be. Must be.
Christo, before I forget to talk to you about this, the whole Kaya Lam story, it is something that has now started emerging and is starting to get some traction. But tell us about it. You spoke about that at the last BizNews conference. Are you seeing any improvement?
I hope it's getting traction. It's one of those, again, enduring mysteries. Because can I start? Because I thought when you invited me, how will I start our discussion? So maybe this is a good point to do it. You very kindly said I must come and share my wisdom. And I thought to myself, the only wisdom really is when you get to my age, is to understand that there isn't really a hell of a lot of wisdom required to solve problems. Things are actually reasonably simple, I think. And now I've forgotten what I wanted to say, follow up, which is again a sign of age. But, sorry, what was
Kaya Lam.
Kaya Lam. Yeah. Kaya Lam, there was a book written by an economist, Hernando de Soto, The Mystery of Capital, where he made the statement that around the world, poor people literally own trillions of dollars worth of real estate, but they can do nothing with it because they don't have title. They've got full ownership rights, except they don't have title. And I was fascinated I always thought, he should get the Nobel Prize. He didn't. But, and then I met him with Neil Ferguson in Munich. We had dinner together, and I said, Hernando, tell me, how much success did you have with this wonderful plan? And he said, only, if I remember correctly, only 2 governments, Peru, where he came from, and Singapore, to an extent, adopted his plan. And I said, but I will buy you a ticket to come to South Africa and talk to our government? He said, no, I've been there twice. Because it's such an obvious solution. The Free Market Foundation had calculated that there are between 7 and 11 million households in South Africa where people own the structure but not the land. Now, in those communities, I'm told, there is a great understanding of the rights of the person that occupies the land. You know, you can't just go and take your neighbor's land. There will be consequences. But the fact is, legally, they don't have title. So the Free Market Foundation came up with this idea that people could contribute money. At the time, 10, 15 years ago, more probably, it cost 2,000 Rand to have a title registered. You know, the lawyers and the deeds office and so on. And strangely enough, the first place they got permission was Parys in the Free State, which had an ANC mayor, female, and Ace Magashule was the premier. And they gave permission that we could take this project further, and we, organized the first few hundred title deeds. And I went up there and handed them over to people, and I mean, really very moving scenes. I remember one old black lady, bursting out in tears when she got the piece of paper to say, at last, I've got something that I can leave my children. She'd lived in this little house, and so it was a wonderful experiment, and I thought it would take off. And the government can so easily cure it. I know our executive mayor is very much in favor and helps in a offshoot of this project, because then, out of the blue, a guy who immigrated from Sweden to South Africa came with another concept, that he would go to people who owned a house, an RDP house, for instance. He would then put up 6 units, like probably 100, 120 square feet, and consisting of a bathroom, a little kitchenette as you come in, and then one large room. And he does a deal with the owner that he builds 6 of these units. The owner must procure the tenants, collect the rent, manage the whole situation, and for the first X number of years, the owner gets 1/6 of the rent. And so it builds, and eventually after 20 years, that house owner owns those 6 units, which in those days, I mean, the last time I looked, the rent was like 4,000 Rand a month. But perfect accommodation with Wi-Fi and everything, hot and cold running water. So it's a wonderful initiative, and it took a guy from Sweden to come and launch it. He's done quite well. I don't know, Jordan may know the numbers better, but the last time I spoke to him, he'd already built something like 550 of these units. Now, these are people living in those units who would otherwise have lived in a backyard shack with no amenities and pay the same sort of rent. So the solutions are there. Very simple.
Would you talk to Duduzane Zuma about this?
I will certainly talk to him. I'm sure he will support it. I gathered from what he said, I got the impression he would support that kind of initiative.
Indeed.
That's just thinking out of the box. I mean, we always tend to think, no, but, if people want to own a piece of land on which they built, they must buy it. They must go through the whole process. Not necessary. They're occupying the land. They've been occupying it for generations. It is theirs.
African solutions to African problems.
To an African problem.
But DeSoto, how well is that taken off in Peru, in his homeland?
Well, I don't know exactly how well, but Hernando de Soto claimed that those were the 2 countries where he thought he had achieved success.
You've had a wonderful life in many respects, but to have dinner with Hernando de Soto and Neil Ferguson, it's like a bucket list, big tick.
Yeah.
What came out of that? What else came out of that?
No, I became friendly with Neil Ferguson 14 years ago. I was a great admirer. I mean, I loved his work. And he is a remarkable guy. And he was born in Africa. Yeah, in Kenya. Grew up in Kenya. Went back to Scotland, and the rest is history. He's a remarkable guy. Caro and I went to his conference last year in Sicily. And he always has these amazing people there. The point you're making, that I met Elon Musk on one of his meetings. Last year when we were in Sicily, we met that fellow Merrick Garland, who was the Attorney General under Joe Biden, whom incidentally the Bidens blame that he wasn't prepared to prosecute Trump as Attorney General. And he's an interesting guy, this Merrick Garland, nominated to be a Supreme Court justice, but by Clinton, I think. And then he wasn't confirmed, and Clinton's term ran out. So he never became a Supreme Court justice.
But that privilege of a global view, of engaging with people who really do know what's happening around the world. And we're a small country, economically speaking. How does that translate into the way that you see South Africa's future?
Well, it certainly, the quick answer is that it strengthened my belief in South Africa, my optimism for South Africa, because you suddenly become aware of just how many problems there are in the rest of the world and how people are grappling with them, sometimes successfully, other times less successfully. But you suddenly see us, and certainly from my point of view, remember I come from Uppington, it's where the newspaper arrived 2 days late. So, you kind of, it's really, it's a wonderful way to learn that lesson, to engage with those people, to listen to them, the problems that they're confronting and how they solve them.
We seem to have a bit of a sickness in our country. I remember once listening to Trevor Manuel when he was the finance minister saying, all we lack is self-confidence. Today, it's actually worse than that. What we seem to hear is just pessimism. Pretty much, there are a lot of reasons for it, but it's almost endemic in our psyche.
Yeah, I tend to try to not see it in a way. Mentioning Trevor Manuel, I had a fascinating experience a couple of weeks ago. I got invited to a dinner of the Group of 30. Now, I don't know whether you've ever heard of them. The Group of 30 is a group consisting of state presidents, ex-state presidents, governors of central banks, and ex-governors of central banks. They constitute this Group of 30. Now, Trevor is chairman of one of the committees or something, and he made a speech. Now, I thought I wanted to mention that tonight because it's again one of those things that we as Africans should take note of. Trevor made a statement that the IFC, on all their infrastructure development financing deals that they've done in Africa, over a 20-year period, had a return of 5.6 times the return they would have had on the S&P.
Wow.
The point he was making is how these institutions milk Africa. Now, I don't know, Davy is here, he can perhaps give us a little bit more insight into it, but Trevor made the statement, and, he will have had his facts correct.
Why would they be able to get away with it? Is it incompetence? Or is it
I don't know whether it's incompetence, it's probably need. From Africa, we don't have that much bargaining power, I imagine. That's the reason.
Not corruption?
No, I don't think corruption. No, because the IFC itself is not corrupt. Maybe
I'm
there's
talking about the
corruption
government.
there.
Like in Mozambique with the tuna.
That there's some kickback or something. But 5.6 times the S&P return, which is shocking.
It is extraordinary. And in your whole business life, you're in your 80s now.
Yeah.
You're not stopping.
No, I can't. I've got 7 grandchildren. It's,
What gets you up in the morning? What gets you tap dancing to work?
No, well, I love life to start with. And, one tries to make a contribution for as long as you can. And I love what I'm doing. I work with young people. My son is in my office. I've got young colleagues, young partners. And I see so many opportunities in South Africa that I'm always amazed that it seems so many people just don't see it.
Why?
Well, maybe, there is this air of pessimism. That's another thing maybe that illustrates something to answer that question, why. I read recently that from the 1980s to the present, of all the employable people in a country or in the world, only 40% were employed. David Rood calls it the participation rate. That's the economist's term. I asked him at dinner, what do you call it? Because it's a funny statistic. We were at 40%. The rest of the world were at 60%. Now, that difference is not as huge as the following statistic, which is that in countries similar to ours, middle-income countries, they have 20% of the population are business owners or self-employed. In South Africa, it's 5%.
Wow.
Now look at that difference.
That's a worry.
5 to 20, which is part of the unemployment problem. There aren't enough people out there, entrepreneurs and business people. And that's part of our problem. But listening to Duduzane, I don't know whether I've told you the story before. Please stop me if I have. Years ago, before Jacob Zuma delivered his SONA, he invited a few business people to the Cape Sun. I went, and then somebody said, but you Christo, say something. So I got up and I addressed Zuma. I said, Mr. President, I'm the oldest guy in the room. And he said, no, I'm older than you are. But the fact is, I am older than he is. And I said, no, I'm the oldest guy. I said, I want to give you, in all modesty, advice for your SONA tomorrow. And my advice is encapsulated in two stories. The one is, I was an advocate for a few years. And at the bar, there's a custom that a junior advocate, if he has a problem that he can't quite deal with, he goes to a senior to ask for help. And that's the one story. The other story, which I'll complete now, the other story is my mother always taught us, when you spend money, you mustn't buy things that you want. That's no reason to buy. You must also not buy things that you need, because everybody cooks up a need that isn't really a need. You must only spend money on things that you cannot do without. That's the test. So now back to the advocate. So this young advocate was briefed to write an opinion on a very difficult piece of law, and he did it and went to the senior, and the senior said, sit down, and he read it, and afterwards said, well, I've now read your work, and I've got good news for you and bad news. So the youngster said, what's the bad news? He said, well, in your attempt to deal with this intricate question of law, you started off by asking yourself entirely the wrong question. So he said, what could the good news be then? He said, well, the good news is, therefore, the fact that your answer is 100% wrong doesn't matter at all. If you ask the wrong question, the answer doesn't matter. So I then said respectfully, Mr. President, here is the advice. From tomorrow, from your SONA, make the statement that everything that the government does from this day on will be put through the screen of will it create jobs or destroy jobs. make that the only consideration. And the audience liked it. And then I got an invitation to come to the SONA address the following day. I arrived at Parliament. They took me to the president's box and put me in the third or fourth row from the front. I'd hardly sat down. They came scurrying, no, come, you've got to move to the front row here. And I thought, is it possible that a miracle that happened, that Zuma's going to say, we're going to ask the right question and get the right answer? Needless to say, didn't happen.
But you did have a front row seat.
I did have a front row seat, but only to listen that my advice fell on deaf ears. So,
at BNC 6, which was the last time that you were at the conference, you quoted Smuts's line about South Africa never being as good as it should be, or never as bad as it could be.
Right.
In the 2 years since, have we moved in one direction or another?
And I think we've definitely moved in the right direction. No, I mean, the GNU and the green shoots, and, Jordan correctly made the point that they don't yet implement everything, but they're talking the right language. So that's progress.
And this whole coalition, we're going to move to questions in a moment. The whole coalition governance that we now have in South Africa, is that a new dawn for us in many ways?
I think so. And like most commentators, I believe that South Africa, for the next 10 to 20 years, will have coalition governments. And I think it's good.
Even in cities?
Even in cities, yeah. I mean, subject to all the caveats that we spoke about. I mean, getting the right people. The other thing that I lately have been giving some thought is that we're looking for all these solutions. How do we do this? How do we do that? But we overlook something very basic, I think, at times, like, for instance, our electoral system. I think it's, there's no accountability. Now, I got the old Van Zyl-Slabbert report from 2002, 2003, where there was this committee that was tasked by the then Minister Buthelezi to look at the electoral system. And it's interesting that they couldn't come up with an improvement. And it's funny how they analyzed it. They said the electoral system has to be fair, inclusive, and simple. And there must be accountability. Those 4 factors. They got the first 3 right, but they couldn't fit the 4th one in. And they looked at various solutions, but in the end it got nowhere. I think our electoral system needs to be looked at again 32 years later, because, there is very little apparent accountability. And then even the way our parliament functions, there was an article written by Dr. Pieter Mulder about the deficiencies in our constitution. The fact that our ministers are members of parliament. There are countries like Nigeria and others that he mentions where that's not the case. And as we know, in the United States, it's not the case. And he thinks that's a problem. We should look at that. And 1 or 2 other things that even our parliamentary system, I believe, can be looked at to improve things.
Jason Gaskell asks, he says, the world is changing faster than ever, but you've led through decades of change. Looking back, what have you found changes least about leadership and people? And what are younger leaders overlooking because they might be too focused on the change that's happening?
That's, this whole thing about leadership. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe leadership is, all about interaction with people. Do you like people? Do you tend to get along with people? And coupled, I believe very strongly, to a positive approach to life. I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than a negative leader. Well, he probably won't be a leader if he's that negative. But I don't think the new generation lacks anything because they're focusing on the wrong things. The challenges are the same. The world has changed, but the challenges remain very much the same, in my view.
Ingrid Matthews asks, Christo, you've spent a lifetime watching African consumers change. What is happening in Africa today that you think most businesses still haven't recognized?
Well, let's first start off by saying that what the basic problem in Africa is that, most of these economies are single commodity economies. You take Angola, where the oil price is good, then it's lovely doing business in Angola. When the oil price is low, you can't get your money out. So that is an essential problem of Africa, which, there are many attempts to cure that. But I thought I wanted to tell you this story because Duduzane talking about, the masses and what one can do, what business can do. One of the things that I'm very proud of about Pep Stores is Pep Stores was founded on the basis of making clothes affordable for poor people. When I grew up in Uppington as a child, you very rarely saw a black or colored child that was not dressed in hand-me-downs. Very seldom a brand new outfit. Now, in 1965, in Pep Stores, for a 3-4-year-old child, you could buy shoes, underpants, shorts, and a T-shirt for under R1. So suddenly it made clothing affordable for poor people. And what I began to understand was that those of us who grew up in more fortunate circumstances have no idea what it does to a person's self-image if you always have to wear old, hand-me-down clothes. That dignity, that the fact that you dressed properly brings is invaluable.
Where did you source it from?
Where did
the clothes? Where did you
get
the clothes
in those days, we sorted a lot of it in Durban. There were a lot of Indian manufacturers. And in Hong Kong, we started buying in Hong Kong, obviously stuff that came out of China very cheaply. I mean, one of our main draw lines, loss leaders, was a handkerchief for 1 cent. And I saw so many young children coming. The first time in their life, they would come to a shop and buy something, piece of clothing, handkerchief for 1 cent.
I once had a conversation with a peer of yours who said the secret to being successful in business is to have the big vision, but never to lose sight of the details. So to have that ability. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and particularly in retail. I mean, there's an old rhyme: retail is detail. You can't slip on anything. It's like hospitality as the same feature. You could go to a 5-star hotel and everything's wonderful until you see a mark on the couch, and the experience goes away.
So the ShopRite story, is that retail is detail?
Yeah.
Because it appears to be just so far ahead today.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, but I mean, those guys, that management team, they are just absolutely brilliant.
Did you find them?
No, I think that credit belongs to YT Person, the team that's there now. I suppose I can take a little bit of credit for finding YT Person. But it was Renier van Rooyen who appointed YT Person. But YT and I were friends from our university days. And when I bought control of the group, obviously, I refound him.
Are you worried that they might lose their way? They might become arrogant or complacent?
Well, there's always that risk. There's always that risk. But I mean, that's why there are younger people coming up, that are ambitious and that see new things. And provided the culture is such that that sort of approach is appreciated and encouraged, no, then why would they? I mean,
because it just appears as though Shoprite is so far ahead that they're uncatchable.
Yeah, that I often explain to people. They ask me about some of our competitors that I won't name. The problem is with a business like Shoprite. The volumes are enormous, so the momentum of the business is enormous. So if you get it right, the momentum works for you. But if you get it wrong, then the momentum drives you into the ground. Because what's happened in the last few years, I mean, you will have seen in the accounts, Shoprite spent billions on IT and new warehouses and things. And they keep spending billions to stay ahead of the curve. Because otherwise, if you fall behind, the other guys will eat you up.
Was it a surprise to you that Pick n Pay declined so much? Because at a point in time, and it seems inconceivable today, Pick n Pay was comfortably ahead of Shoprite. What did they do wrong, perhaps, if you can share?
I don't want to criticize other people. Look at the mistakes that I've made. But I belong to the Joel Stern school, that a good company should never pay a dividend. Because if you pay a dividend, that means that you're telling your shareholder, you can do better with the money than I can. And I'm your management, you are paying me. So I should theoretically do better with the money than you can. If you need a bit of money, sell a few of your shares. Why do you need a dividend? So for years, I, paid very little dividends in Shoprite until the institutions forced me to increase the dividend payout to match Pick n Pay. Now, we never matched Pick n Pay. They always had a very low dividend cover. The opposite is Anton Rupert. I mean, he had 7-9 times cover. So, but they I think they had 1.5 times cover. And the problem is you need that cash to keep the building the business at the cutting edge. So if you ask me, what was the mistake? The first mistake was the dividend policy.
And I suppose you can take that down to smaller businesses as well.
Sure.
Reinvest, don't take out.
Sure, that is most small business people. I mean, I've seen them come and go. The first money they make, it's a new car, a Porsche, or a fancy house, or whatever. I mean, that's the wrong way.
There are so many more questions here. Ryan has, after all your years of success and community service, what does white monopoly capitalism mean to you now?
Well, there are ladies present, otherwise I would tell you what I think of that. First of all, let me give the decent answer. I don't know what it means. I don't know where. I mean, we know that this was a political or politicized slogan, but what does it mean? I mean, white monopoly capital, nobody's ever been able to explain it to me.
Have you asked the right people?
Maybe I haven't asked the right people, but I'll put the question out there. Anybody who's happy to come and explain to me what it means. As I say, what monopoly, I did economics 1 at university, and I understood a monopoly to mean that you are a monopoly, that you control it. And where do I see that in South Africa? Who controls what? I mean, the Stellenbosch mafia, I know most of those guys. They are mafiosi, but they don't control anything.
David Melville says, Christo, you had the privilege of attending a wonderful government school, Boys High.
Yeah.
What impact did the school's teachers, boys, and ethos have on you?
A tremendous impact. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful school with a wonderful tradition.
Which boys' high is he talking
about?
Paul
Boys High.
Okay.
Which they didn't do well in rugby 2 weeks ago, but sometimes they do well.
Have they kept that ethos?
I think so. Well, yes and no. I haven't had too much contact with the school in the last few years, so I can't really speak. I was chairman of the old student organization until 3 or 4 years ago. But so I don't know whether it's still the same. But in those days that I was there, was the late 50s, yeah, it had a wonderful ethos. I mean, the teachers who were there, I mean, they were academically of a professor class. Wonderful people. And yeah, a great school. But South Africa has many great schools.
Bruce's question is, there are plenty of entrepreneurs in South Africa, many of whom cannot build their businesses to their full potential due to difficulty to raise capital. I have two good friends at Metal, and both tell me I must build my business to the point I no longer need to raise capital and then come and talk to them. How do you get the percentage of successful entrepreneurs up from 5 to 20% when capital is so difficult to access?
Well, I'm a great believer in luck. And I'm going to tell you a story to illustrate it. My most recent story, and I'm going to mention the name, is when you talk about luck. The Oppenheimer family, wonderful family as they are, were fortunate enough that they inherited the Rhodes Empire, in a way. And, they were the Oppenheimers, De Beers, Diamonds, in the same breath. And somebody told me 8 or 9 years, a little bit more, 12 years ago, De Beers was valued at $12 billion. When the Oppenheimers finally sold, it was valued at $8 billion. Today, they are struggling to find a buyer at less than $1 billion. So luck, what do you ascribe that to? The Oppenheimers got a check of $5 billion for their stake in De Beers. Now, that's the recent story. If I go back to the PEP story, when we wanted to list PEP in 1972, it was the first listing after the 1969 crash. So everybody was looking, what is this little company for a bunch of boere from Uppington building a retail business and bringing it to the market? So there was great excitement in the press. And in those days, the listing always happened on a Wednesday. And the procedure for the listing started Wednesday. That Wednesday was D-Day, and then D-Day minus 6 weeks, you had to do this, and minus 5 weeks this. That was the process. You probably know it. The last event is on the Monday. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange Committee meet to finally approve the listing on the Wednesday. And Renier van Rooyen was up in Johannesburg. He called me and said, "Here's a big gemors. The committee had just decided that they're not going to approve the listing," which would have finished the company, because they said our balance sheet wasn't strong enough. We were going to run into cash flow problems. And we knew that, we knew our business. We knew that that was not a problem. But I flew up to Johannesburg, and together with a chap called Harry Lorry, who was then the managing director of Senbank. I don't know whether you remember.
Yes, I do remember.
They were our bankers. We went to see the committee and explained to them how our business works. And we just couldn't convince them. They said, no, they cannot approve the listing because the balance sheet is not strong enough. Now, you can imagine, if there's an announcement, the listing has been cancelled because the balance sheet isn't strong enough. And we couldn't convince them. And finally, Harry Lorry, without discussing it with us, got up and he looked at the chairman, Richard Lurie, and he said, "Mr. Lurie, what do you think the balance sheet requires to meet your standard?" He said 3 million rand in those days, in 1972. And Harry Lorry said, well, you'll have my letter this afternoon that if the company runs out of money, I will underwrite a 3 million rand rights issue.
Wow.
Now, if that guy wasn't there on that day, at that moment, my history would have been somewhat different.
Wow. So interesting. The time has flown by, but I can't let you go without giving us your thoughts on our beautiful country and what keeps you optimistic and upbeat.
Well, I wanted to say, listening to Duduzane, I obviously had certain preconceived ideas. And listening to him, I thought, well, there's another thing that I can add to my list while I'm optimistic. If you listen to some of the things he says, which in a nutshell, the way I interpret it, let's talk to each other. Let's understand that we have to think out of the box. I mean, Jordan made the same point. It is a new world. Let's think out of the box and make things happen. And then, my latest mantra is, I did it with the Siziphiwe chap, the podcast.
Yes.
And he says, that podcast went viral. He said that 300,000 people looked at it. And this was my mantra. I said, whenever people now ask me, what do you think of South Africa now? My answer is, compared to what? Let's start there. Compare. And then suddenly the picture looks a bit different. So I'm still on that. My children are here. My grandchildren are here. And I'm encouraging them to make their lives here.
Christo Wiese, it's always a privilege, but tonight particularly. Thank you.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth. Building wealth and protecting legacy since 2004. Invest better with Brenthurst. Start your day a step ahead. BizNews Insider. It delivers the business stories that matter every morning straight to your inbox. Sharp, fast, and free. Subscribe now.